wanted to just start off with a couple of simple questions that I had about the export products in wheat. You mentioned wheat and pulse crops, particularly lentils, being priority. Have we any idea of the volumes that we're trading in that area in either of those products right now?
So our a dollar value, I thank you, Madam Chair. I give you dollar value of our imports, but if that's okay. So in fact, wheat is our top duty bill export into the Ecuador's market, and we sent an average over the time period from 2019 to 2022. We sent about 261 million dollars worth of exports. So
Sure, totally.
Average from 2019 to 2022, so per year, U.S. dollars. So
any in the mineral side, is potash involved in that as well?
I don't see potash as a top 10 export, but nevertheless, I'm not sure what their MFN duty rate is on that potash. I'm not. I could check for you.
I noted that Saskatchewan and Alberta are our major export areas in the agriculture side with the most potential there. Just on it caught my eye on the oil developments there as well. Excuse me. We're exporting, what is it, 178 million dollars worth of crude oil to them, one of our major exports of the 679 that you had in the trade. And we send them we send refined oil back. Is that correct?
I'm not entirely certain about the oil trade in terms of what goes and what comes back, but look into it.
How do the Ecuadorian oil environmental standards for petroleum products in Ecuador compare to those here in Canada?
Thank you for the question. Compared to in Canada, I honestly, I don't know enough about it. I'd have to look into it. And as I'm thinking, that might be a question we could pose to the ambassador when he comes back, and we could just close the loop with him in terms of providing a more fulsome answer in terms of what the regulations are in Ecuador on that.
I asked that similar because it's a similar question to what my colleague from the NDP just asked in relation to labor intensity and that sort of thing, and the agreement of the, if I get my terms right here, the GTAGA, the Global Trade and Gender Arrangement with the Inclusive Trade Action Group, and how we're involved with that. If we're making sure that there are rules in place for one, are they also in place for the environmental side? Can someone answer that for me?
Sure, I'll take that one. We intend fully to pursue robust provisions in labor and environment and to back those by dispute settlement as per our usual approach in free trade agreement negotiations.
Just wanted to wonder if there are industries in Canada that you're aware of that would benefit from this free trade agreement due to the current lack of markets here. Are there opportunities there for products that we aren't processing or developing here? Or actually for the products that we are processing here? New ones, I mean, other than because I know, Mr. Forsyth, you mentioned that this is an agreement that we can really expand on if there's opportunities there, and I just wondered if you could elaborate on that.
I guess I can keep going with that. So in addition to products mentioned already, agricultural products like wheat and lentils, largely out of Western provinces going out of the Port of Vancouver, we have manufacturing goods interests in Quebec and Ontario, especially with a booming air cargo business out of Toronto Pearson. So that's largely the basis of interest from Quebec and Ontario, for example.
Types of power developments we have in Canada, is there any opportunity for that in this country, in Ecuador? I mean, we've been in South America for years in power development opportunities. I just wondered how that affects Ecuador here.
Well, I would say that really any services, investment, or trade in goods opportunities would be opened up by this agreement. As was mentioned, this is a last kind of puzzle piece in the Pacific Coast of South America that we don't have FTA coverage with. They do not have an FTA with the United States. That gives a competitive advantage scenario. So really, when you look at long-term commercial development, we have a study recently done on our Canada-Chile FTA after 25 years, and we found 400% growth of trade. I would think about the Ecuador FTA as a sort of piece of that broader puzzle with our exporters, services providers who are experienced in the Andean region, that this is another opportunity in that broader portfolio story.
Thank you, Mr. McGuire. I'm sorry I let you go. I know I gave you some extra time as it was. Ms. Fortier, please, 5 minutes.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Alors, merci.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for being here today for this important panel. Our government is committed to reconciliation, as we know, and that includes economic reconciliation. And we talk a lot about the way that trade agreements can benefit Canadian companies. But could you talk, and you mentioned this a little bit, but could you talk to us concretely about the efforts and actions being made and or should be made as part of the negotiations with the Ecuadorian government to promote and facilitate access to Indigenous companies to that market, and also Indigenous companies in Ecuador? I'd like to hear what you have to say about that.
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. And I think absolutely that is a key priority for the government and for us in our FTA negotiations. What we have seen, starting from a broad base, certainly Aboriginal companies, Indigenous-based companies have the similar opportunities that other Canadian companies have, but at the same time, because they're generally smaller, generally don't look to export, we try to give them a boost, if you will, to do what we can. So we do that not only within the FTA, but certainly outside of the FTA as well, through our Trade Commissioner Service at Global Affairs Canada. So we work very closely with our colleagues to ensure that those opportunities are there for Aboriginal businesses. I would also add, though, that what we have done within an FTA is to build on, with each FTA, each recent FTA, Indigenous chapters, trade and Indigenous chapters, and to build on language in each chapter, make sure that we are covering more and more bases. And so that is exactly what we're doing. We were doing that with we did that with the Canada-Ukrainian FTA. We were working on it under the Canada-UK and just building on all of the, continuing to build on the pieces, the chapter pieces for Canada Indigenous FTA pieces in the trade agreement. So it's certainly something that we continue to focus on and do what we can both within the FTA and outside of it. So.
I don't
have a lot of time left, so I'll go to the next theme. So Ecuador joined the Global Trade and Gender Arrangement, and it also joined the ITAG in 2023, and Canada so it was the goal is to promote the equality of gender equality and women's economic empowerment, and the other question, the inclusivity as well. So I would like to know what are the implications of Canada's participation in this in the GTAGA and ITAG with respect to the presence of if we were to establish an agreement, what role would those play in that?
Well, I would see, thank you for the question, first of all. We would see those as complementary initiatives. For example, in fact, all of the other members of the GTAGA and ITAG are partners with whom we already have free trade agreements with. We're able to have more plurilateral discussions, build further synergies with those partners. And then in the FTA, we focus on our chapters on trade and gender, trade and Indigenous peoples, and build cooperation activities bilaterally, one-on-one, during and after the entry into force of the agreement.
Mais avez-vous des mesures spécifiques pour vraiment
Do you have
encourager
specific measures to encourage women run businesses that are new in the export industry? Because we're working more and more to give those opportunities. So do you have any concrete examples that you could of how this could be done as part of this FTA?
Well, certainly. I mean, the intent of the chapter is to promote women-owned business trade and, for example, women-led business trade missions. All those types of promotional activities are within the scope of what we have in mind. And these are areas that our Ecuadorian colleagues are very excited to explore with us and are committed to pursuing through the trade agreement.
Mr. Baldinelli for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Quickly, I just want to follow up. Based on the excellent briefing materials that were provided by our staff, I mean, they broke out some interesting statistics based on StatsCan data. And, you know, from 2022, and, you know, Canadian exports are to Ecuador were 603 million, wheat almost 300 million of that, refined oil, secondly, $164 million. So those two items were about 77% of our trade exports. And then Ecuador exports to Canada 79 million, and crude oil is number one at $178 million. Precious minerals, ores, $150 million. Again, those two make up about 48% of the total exports to Canada. So those two items are quite important to Ecuador, I would imagine, in any trade agreement that they reach with Canada. So have they positioned any policies or positions to Canada with regards to protecting crude oil exports to Canada?
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair, and just a couple of pieces on that. So thank you for that information. So we're just at a preliminary discussion with Ecuador. We haven't delved into kind of where our interests lie with specific products. As we study their economy and study what their dutiable exports are, that's, I think, from our assessment, where their interests might be, but they haven't expressed those interests to us directly. And so I think, just to clarify, though, I think the MFN tariff rate on some of the products you mentioned coming into Canada may be zero. So, and similar, our exports to the Ecuador.
Does it not concern the government that, as an oil-producing nation, that Ecuadorian oil is being imported into Canada instead of us being allowed to service our own market?
Thank you for the question. I guess it depends on the kind of oil that's coming in, what it's used for, and again, if it's coming in at no duty, then it would come in from, if the MFN duty rate on that is zero, it could come from anywhere, whether it's Ecuador or United States or.
How are the Ecuadorian oil environmental standards compared to the most ethically produced oil and natural gas in the world?
That's an excellent question, and I think one that perhaps our ambassador would be best placed to answer when he's online.
Okay, thank you. And there were riots in the streets in Ecuador previously when the government moved to reduce gasoline subsidies and increase prices. So could you confirm that Canada is not going to introduce or insist on a carbon tax in this free trade agreement?
I think as part of our discussions with Ecuador, we are looking at a comprehensive environment chapter. Whether Ecuador is interested in discussions about that, I'm not aware. But given the fact that that we are in preliminary discussions with them about launching an FTA, I'm not sure anything is off the table, frankly.
Madam Chair, how much time?
14 seconds.
I understand from the Trade Commissioner Services, they mentioned Ecuador seeking to attract investment in project areas such as transportation, electricity, water, construction, telecommunications, education, and so on. right now, primarily our investments are, the largest investments are in the natural resource sector. Is it possible to define for us like the other natures of investments